Hello, and welcome to the Argyle Finance Solutions Expo. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Bill. Our sponsor is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active on social media, please use the hashtag Argyle Digital and follow us at Argyle Exec Forum. Also be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. Finally, and most importantly, we would love to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us. Now let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Mohit Bhatia, Chief Financial Officer at Welch Equipment Company. We're excited to have Mohit with us for his opening keynote titled Investing in IT to Strengthen Financial Security. Welcome, Mohit, and over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon to wherever all our viewers are and participants are. So I'm not going to be putting out a lot of presentation pages and whatnot, but we're going to talk through some of the key elements and aspects of what and where finance and IT converge and need to be careful looking at collaboration, specifically as it relates to IT and finance cross points. And then I'd certainly like participation, questions, discussions, comments on some of the things that I'll talk about. And then we can take it from there to make it more interactive and interesting for everyone involved. So with that, I'll provide a few thoughts of mine in terms of what or where we are as a function, and which is obviously relevant across multiple different industries, which is relevant across different businesses, no matter what we're doing and where we are. I mean, if we seriously look at the business world today, I mean, it is defined by innovation and agility. More than ever, every business, no matter what field they are operating in, needs to become a lot more digitally competent to meeting the internal and external customer expectations with technology that changes literally every day. And there's a huge acceleration of how much can we adapt, how much can we innovate, how much can we change, not just from internally business standpoint, but also externally to meet our customer expectations, to launch products, to carry our messages across to our customer segments, and be more efficient and effective in making sure that we are visible, we are known, we are on the top of the mind from a recall standpoint with a customer. And a lot of that and all of that is actually driven by our IT and IT infrastructure and IT innovation. But I'll provide some statistics that are interesting as I was looking to get some material on and just some external data points on what we were talking about today. And I found that this is coming from McKinsey, that 20% of the tech budgets which are dedicated to delivering new projects, innovations, new products for the businesses are actually used to resolve technical debt. And I'll talk about that in a minute in more detail. Literally 50% to 60% of the projects actually have a cost overrun because they're not either well designed, well conceived, or aligned to the company initiatives of how things need to be managed and what are the key priorities that need to be addressed. And therefore, literally 70 to 80% of the key executives are not 100% sure how their projects and strategies align to the business's strategies and projects, specifically when it comes to IT. So what all of these mean is that there's not a more optimal or best utilization of financial budgets and financial elements as it relates to how IT needs to be managed. And that's why more and more companies are trying to make sure that there is a much closer alignment, convergence of IT and finance. And in a lot of businesses, actually, the CFO organization has IT as a part of its organization reporting into it, because it is one of the major user, recipient, and manager of IT, specifically as it relates to capital and revenue expenditures, coming to how the business needs to be managed. So what we really need to look at is change in our understanding of how finance needs to work with IT. Um, I talked a little bit about technical debt, which is an interesting element or interesting way to look at the whole aspect of we need to be continuing to spend money literally every year, every month on improving our infrastructure, whether it is digital infrastructure as it relates to software and services and support, or it relates to hardware infrastructure, whether it's servers, whether it's cloud-based used compute power, just desktop and user-based computing requirements. And that's probably a priority that has to be ongoing. So it literally becomes a part of your ongoing running budget that you need to manage on an ongoing basis, because there is no way around it. You have to have that basic infrastructure in place in order to operate your business effectively and efficiently. But at the same time, you need to be dealing with changes in the external business environment. You need to be dealing with changes in your strategies of where and how business operates. Things like you want to launch new products, you want to reach into new markets, you want to reach to new customer segments. All of that cannot be driven just by the business side of things, but finance and IT have to play a key role, because a lot of the times you cannot reach your end customer without having an IT infrastructure backbone in place in order to operate efficiently in that landscape. So these elements are really overwhelming and really stress how you need to manage your business, how you need to manage the financial elements of the business, and how you manage IT in regard to that. So what needs to happen is a portfolio and strategic management structure and policy in place that is needed for every business, no matter what's the size, big or small, what industry you're operating in. You need to have a strategic alignment of IT, finance, and business into a single framework that would allow you to focus on how you channel and manage the ongoing tech debt, technical debt takeoff, how you manage investments into innovation and new products, and how you make sure that the key elements of your business, specifically as it relates to online and external threats, both physical and digital, that the businesses are faced literally daily. How do you manage all of that? And that's what is a critical element of why we've been having a topic which essentially converges IT and finance. So finance and financial managers need to play a key role in integrating the structure and framework of how you need to bring in the business strategies and the business leaders to work together with IT strategies and IT leaders in a single framework, with the underlying and underpinning of how much investment you need to make, both on a short-term basis and a long-term basis, into the business requirements and IT requirements, which is why IT budgeting and IT planning, not just short run. So I think we need to move away from the mindset of 1 year budget planning for areas like IT to more a 3 year, 5 year planning framework of IT, which converges directly with how businesses operate and how businesses need to operate, so that the transformation of the business, the innovation, and the infrastructure and underlying uh, cybersecurity threat management kind of are key elements of how you would address them on each individual budget year, as well as a planning horizon and a strategic horizon basis. And that they all need to come together through a financials framework and a project portfolio strategic management approach that needs to be evolved. And if a lot of the companies have taken this to a pretty advanced level of how that works, but most of the companies are still trying to figure out what that optimal framework needs to be and how that needs to work together. So this is before even we get into things like how you work with the CISO, how you work with data security, and what are the key elements. This is an important and a critical framework of how you need to operate, because if you do not have a viewpoint and sight, both short term and long term, on how all of these different elements need to be funded, everything else isn't going to work in harmony. And that's why I started with this piece of the business requirement. The next part is data security management. Now, as we continue to evolve and change the technology, and that's why I talked about the technology infrastructure, both hardware and software, we have to budget, we have to create a critical path of how much we are going to continue to invest in monitoring, management, updates, and changes to our infrastructure security requirements. Because you put in the money, you put in the investment, you worked with your IT team and resources to say, okay, what is it that we're going to develop? But in order to protect all of that, you need to go back to having what a lot of businesses call a DRP, a disaster recovery plan, or a playbook of how or what you're going to deal with if and when any of these external threats actually materialize. That's one part. The second part is, how are you making sure that you're keeping up to date in protecting the organization's infrastructure, access controls, internal and external, in order to support managing IT and enabling IT to essentially thwart the threats that are coming literally every day. I mean, it's no surprise that literally any company, small or big, faces at least a few hundred different kind of phishing attacks, cyber attacks, ransomware attacks, and just malicious viruses in general that come inside into the business or try to thwart the business firewalls on a daily basis, which means that there needs to be an ongoing monitoring, updates, and investment in that infrastructure that has to happen on a regular basis. That's one part. And the other part of that is, how do you make sure that you're funding it out from the investments and the budgets that you are setting out for IT on a regular basis? Now, this is where finance and information security management need to work together. There need to be a short-term and long-term framework that needs to be evolved. You need to have literally a RACI kind of matrix in place that would allow you to address different deficits, issues, concerns, as well as unforeseen situations, in order to make sure that the business infrastructure and the business access, the business systems are always available in spite of the threats that are coming through. And there has to be an ongoing dialogue. It's not a one-time, once a year discussion. It has to be an ongoing, regular discussion, updates, and collaboration between the functions, in order to ensure that, are we managing and are we completely up to date on what is needed for our basic infrastructure control and access control management? Are we deploying some of the technologies that are out there, which are continuously getting updated, for things like multi-factor authentication? If that's not a part of every business, it needs to be. Are we using physical access controls for key areas within the business, within the facilities, and even in some areas where restricted access control is needed? Do we have those different layers of security control management in place? Do we have role-based access controls not only to our key systems, our ERPs, but also to our libraries of documents that have been stored either physically or digitally in different parts of the organization? And is that something that is reviewed, viewed, and updated on a regular basis? Because creating that once and then not revisiting it is not an option. You have to be able to do that and review that on a regular basis. And that's where the collaboration and the touch points between finance and IT, specifically if you have a designated CISO. If you do not have a designated CISO, then a person who would be designated to manage all the digital control and access control side of things in your organization, they have to collaborate and talk on a regular basis in terms of how that needs to be managed. And then third important element is, in spite of all of these, what if there is an attack? What if there are unforeseen situations that may occur either through a ransomware attack, a cyber attack, a phishing attack, and how does the organization respond to that? Um, as I mentioned briefly in one of my earlier remarks, every business needs to have a business continuity plan and a disaster recovery plan. It's a playbook of how you need to manage in case of unforeseen situation arises that blocks you out from either accessing the key systems, key servers, uh, physical or digital control of your business or business tools, how you need to operate. And this is a document that every business needs to have in place in today's day and age in order to manage these unforeseen situations. Every business needs to have this playbook of what to do in case of this, what not to do in case of this. What is the backup plan? What is our recovery plan? How long does that take? Who all will need to be involved on 0 hours, first 5 hours, first 10 hours, first 24 hours of any such situation happening? What would you do to address it? What is the backup and recovery structure and infrastructure that you have in place? Whether you have a cloud-based backup system, you have a third party who's managing it for you, or you have internal locations, both physical and non-physical, uh, where you would be storing the backup, and how quickly that backup can be restored back so that you're able to come back and operate efficiently in spite of these issues. All of these are discussions. All of these are requirements that every business needs to have today. If that dialogue isn't going on in your organization, then that dialogue must be initiated. If you need to involve a third party to help support that, then that's a requirement, because the loss and the disruption of not planning for it and not managing for it will be far greater than an ongoing investment that you would be making in this endeavor, in this area. Is going to pay back if any such situations occur. And it's not uncommon. We literally have everyday news articles about such situations happening. And that's why IT, finance needs to bring the business side of things and the business organizations to work with IT to make sure that these are adequately addressed and taken care of, and then funded as a part of overall infrastructure and IT investment framework for short term, medium term, and long term in every organization. So those were my key remarks. I'd certainly want to spend, I guess, the last 10 minutes in discussion, dialogue, and Q&A as it regards to these topics.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Mohit, for such an insightful presentation. As a reminder, audience members can still enter questions, and we can go ahead and review some of the questions that came through. This first question asks, can you make any predictions as to what the biggest security threats may be this year?
Well, I think ransomware attacks continue to be one of the biggest threats. I think every day in and day out, you must be hearing or reading about these issues. A lot of the threats emanate from locations and IP addresses that are unknown and at sometimes not traceable because they may be using dynamic IPs that keep on changing and whatnot. So tracking those is really difficult, and that's why it is difficult to figure out where the threat's going to emanate from. The threat could be digital, as I mentioned. It could come as a ransomware attack. It could come as a phishing attack. It could come as simple as a virus that somebody in the organization innocuously opens up or clicks on an email or a link, and then that expands into the rest of the organization. Or it could come in physically, where somebody gets access physically to your facility, is able to walk in and may be able to get some access to your computer systems or your servers or your email systems, and is able to exploit that or use that for advantage. So the threat would come from a lot of different directions. And the point is, are you able to be in a place where you're prepared to manage it, to thwart it, to block it, and in case it moves past those boundaries, those firewalls, are you able to then remediate it and rectify it and come back to being operating business as usual? And that's why these things become an important part of financial management of the business when it comes to IT systems and access controls and security systems.
Great. Thank you so much. This next question, what recommendations can you make for an organization that is struggling to work effectively with their IT team?
So I think there is a lot of different options available these days. You don't necessarily have to have a full IT team in your organization to do all of that. You don't necessarily need to have a full-time uh, chief information security officer or information technology officer or whatnot. You could work with a smaller team, and you could actually outsource a lot of this work to third parties who would manage it for you. You could have monitoring that is done by systems, and you have software and systems that would monitor other software and systems in order to drive more efficiency and most cost effectiveness in these operations. So it's not just a people driven piece. There are a lot of systems, software, and third party options that can be utilized. The point is, you got to go back and you got to look at and talk about what is it that your business structure, strategy, planning, and approach needs to be over a not a short term but a longer term horizon, and how does that meet, how does your growth objectives, how does your business objectives, your customer requirements, how all of those meet what your IT infrastructure and your IT organization setup is. Are they aligned or not? And if they're not aligned, then what is it that you need? The skill sets that you don't have, you don't necessarily need to go and acquire it, as long as you have good skill sets in your organization to figure out what is it that you don't have that you need to get. And you can get that from outside the organization without actually investing a huge amount of resources in people.
Excellent. Thank you. This one question asks, won't AI-driven threats outpace our ability to identify them?
That's a really good point. And to be honest, we are still working and trying to figure out what would those AI driven threats be. Would it be even more brutal attacks, uh, better firewalls? What is it that AI threats would be from an enterprise environment standpoint? Today, we hear a lot more about AI being able to solve the problems or be able to answer to some of the questions, some of the business issues and situations. But it's not there yet. I think it's still in its infancy. what we call, and I just want to clarify this piece specifically, as I'm dealing with it myself in my organization. A lot of times, what we're naming AI isn't necessarily AI. It's more what is known as RPA, robotic process automation. So we got to distinguish between what is really AI and what is robotic process automation. Robotic process automation is all about some of the work that may be done manually or physically by some individuals can actually get automated and be done by software or by systems. AI, on the other hand, is essentially an overarching structure, if I put it that way, that helps in decision making, or that actually learns and inferences enough based on the data sets that it is able to pull and the situations that it is able to analyze to help either make decisions or make decisions for you. I do not believe any organization, most organizations are there where they can actually have a system or a software making decisions for you, which is what AI is. Most of the organizations are trying to work or and figure out how they actually get more efficiency in their operations, which is RPA. And I think we as finance resources, as finance leaders, need to make sure that we create that distinction and help rest of the organization understand that distinction very clearly.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have time for a couple more questions. This next question, are there ever any issues with communication between finance and IT, or is there even any reluctance to work together?
Well, there will always be, similar to any other function that finance is working with, there will be same challenges working with IT. I mean, IT would always require and ask for more resources than what an organization can provide. We're always scaling that uphill battle. And it's always difficult to figure out what you prioritize and what you don't prioritize in limited number of resources, limited amount of resources that may be available for you to work together. But I think it is important to collaborate. And that goes for any other function that you may be working, whether it's marketing, whether it's business development, whether it's sales. You will have some of the similar challenges that you would have with IT. And it is about collaborating and making sure that everyone's an equal business partner in working together and figuring out the right and the most optimal way in which you can allocate and design resources and meet requirements for each function. Exactly the same challenges that you have in IT as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think this is probably a good question to kind of close out with. But how far out should finance teams be preparing for, especially when using scenario planning type tools?
Again, a lot depends on the industry and the kind of business and the kind of customers that companies are dealing with. My experience, most of the time, a 3 or 5 year planning horizon is ideal. Yes, a lot of it is based on assumptions, but a lot of those assumptions are also based on experience and real world scenarios. We should definitely look at least dedicate some time throughout your calendar fiscal year, which is spent on planning, thinking, envisioning, and figuring out what your long-term horizon looks like. 3 years, 5 years is generally ideal, again, depending on industry and product type. But it also helps you prepare and think about things just beyond the day-to-day working, because a lot of times people get lost in the minutia of day-to-day operation. They forget the big picture, the long-term vision, strategy, and business requirements. And so you need to be able to look at that and plan a lot of requirements and business elements on that basis.
Thank you again, Mohit, for such an excellent keynote. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin at 11:35 Eastern, which will be a marketplace thought leadership and demo titled FP&A Trends for Modern Financial Strategy. Please click the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected, and we look forward to seeing you there.